Right now we're going to get into the Word. You're going like, why is this guy sitting? I just decided to sit today. I don't know, it's a cold day. That's all I got. Let's pray. God, we just ask that you would speak to us through your Word. We ask that you'd show us your truth. I want your words to come out through my mouth today. So may the meditations of my heart and the words of my lips just be pleasing to you. And may we lift you up. May we see you a little more clearly. And may you speak to our hearts about what it means to be generous, what it means to handle money the way you want us to handle it. And may we be faithful completely in that, in every way we possibly can. In Jesus' name, amen. So I don't know about you, but I've seen money abused in the church. You guys ever experienced that before? Never seen it. Anybody seen that before? Anybody seen it like really done in a bad, terrible sort of way, where money's been just mishandled? I'm going to tell a story. I mean, this was years ago. I was doing ministry, and I was living in a different part of the country. And I was searching around for like a ministry gig, okay? And I had just left one ministry gig I was in because the church situation was kind of weird, like it wasn't a healthy situation. And started to look around. Wanted to stay in the same area. And then I ended up connecting with these people that were building like this fast-growing mega church situation that was really, really hopping, reaching a lot of people. Like something was happening there that was really significant. And I was really drawn to it. And the people there too, like, started talking to me, started reaching out to me, got to know them well, and they started to get to know me. And they said, come join us, you know? Come join us. Come be a part of this church. And I was promised part-time pay. And it was basically like 100 miles from where we currently lived. And it was me and Sarah and our daughter Charlotte. She was like 1.5. And we're like, hey, we're going to move. We're going to do this. We talked about it a little bit. We saw some like things that were a little odd. Some red flags, like it seemed like there was some pride there, but they were reaching so many people and there seemed to be so much happening that we decided to do it. So we moved 100 miles, took this gig. We moved into like a really ratty apartment, man. We lived in like a jacked up attic that had a toilet with no door. And it was like with somebody else. We were living in somebody else's house, okay? And again, we saw red flags, but we were kind of young and idealistic, or maybe just dumb, you know? It was a large church, and we're like, it seems to be going somewhere. So we went, and then we arrived, and then I was surprised to find out they were like, oh, we're actually not going to pay you. And I'm like, what? They're like, we want you to work for free and work your way in to this. And I'm like, you kind of left that out before I moved my family 100 miles, right? Kind of found out there's no insurance. Nobody had insurance there. I'm like, oh, didn't know about that. Should have asked these questions up front, maybe. Started working, man. Worked at a coffee shop. And then worked at this situation, this fast-growing church that was moving crazy fast, right? I was working like 70 hours a week. It was totally messed up, all right? And then I started to notice things, too. Like the lead pastor, he had a pretty good lifestyle. He was in a nice office. And all the other offices were kind of crappy, you know? He had like a nice car. All the other people working there didn't have such nice stuff. You know, he'd always wear nice clothes and stuff like that. And he would get angry too if you asked about finances. He'd get mad, you know, like real defensive. Like people would ask him and he'd be like, you don't need to know. You just need to know what you get paid. That's it. And then basically we kept serving in this situation because we were locked in. Like, we didn't know where to go, we didn't know what to do, we were far away from home, so we kept sticking it out. And I'm like starting to kind of go crazy. But this wealthy person that was part of this community, this fast-growing church, and it was getting big, man. I was growing like by the hundreds in the year we were there. Like, went from like probably 400 to like 1,500 in a year. I'm not kidding, right? This wealthy person noticed that my family was kind of in a crappy apartment, and they said, hey, we'll donate a year's worth of rent for you. And we'll just pay for your rent. So they did that, but they told that to the lead pastor. And we were basically told not to tell the wealthy person that we knew. Like if you've read Matthew 6, 1 through 4, like keep it anonymous, right? And then we were told, just go land a rental contract. This person's going to pay for your rent. It'll be cool. So we did. We got a lease. We got signed. We really wanted to get out of this apartment. We just wanted to have a bathroom at the door, you know? Right? Lease got signed. And then basically the lead pastor asked the wealthy person to donate the rent to the church. Right? And he basically called me into his office after that and negotiated with me with a calculator. And had a calculator in his hand. And he was like talking real fast. And then it basically ended up, he was like, how much you get paid at this coffee shop, like on a good week? And I'm like, well, this much, but it was like minimum wage. And he's like, okay, so we'll do that. And then we'll divide this amount of money that was donated by 52. And then that'll be your pay. Okay? And I'm like, yeah. And then I realized after we got in, like, we couldn't pay rent. Right? You guys follow all this? You're like, I didn't know this was going to be a therapy session. I'm just saying all this to say, I went through this like years ago. I didn't walk away from Jesus. I actually ended up following Jesus more after. And I've seen firsthand the worst of how money can be handled in the church. Firsthand. I mean, I experienced the sting of it. And it made me like deeply convicted about this issue. Maybe you've seen the worst. Like, maybe you've just seen it on TV. Maybe you've seen moral failures. Maybe you've seen people that have mishandled money. That's happened a lot recently, like where people have, like, it's come out, like, that church leaders, like, really behind the scenes are mishandling money in our culture. Maybe you've just seen, like, the audacious church on display. Like, you come even into this room and you're like, what, they don't have, like, a facility of their own? They don't have, like, millions of dollars of equipment? Like, what's up with this? Like, isn't that what church is supposed to be? Or maybe you're kind of like have seen that and you're kind of tired of it. Like, is that what it's supposed to be? Is it supposed to be a thing like where a bunch of money is spent on so many things that maybe aren't necessary? But I think maybe many of us know what the church should be. It should be a place like where people are helped, where the poor are helped, where those who are hurting find Jesus, where those who need God find him in a community of people. I think a lot of us here believe that. And as a joke, we're calling this series Cha-Ching, all right? Just because I found this slide and it was funny. Right? Because talking about money in the church is weird, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. And I just want to talk about this one thing today, and this big idea is that Jesus can't stand it when people use God to make a profit. People can't stand that. I mean, Jesus can't stand that. We're going to be in John 2:13 through 17. If you guys want to open it up with me. I'm using the ESV, so you know. Basically, it says this, okay? The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and in the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons and the money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade. His disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me. So Jesus is heading into Jerusalem here, okay? And it's like the biggest mecca of worship at this time. Jerusalem was this place where people came from all around to worship God. It was known as the city where God seemed to dwell the most, right? In the time of the Israelites, in the time of the Jewish people and everything, this was the place where people went. These people were coming on a pilgrimage too. You can leave the verses up too because we'll keep like digging into them. That they were coming on a pilgrimage, and it was one of the 3 biggest pilgrimages of the year. The Passover was happening, and a lot of people were coming to Jerusalem to worship God. They traveled sometimes from very far places. Like if you read in Exodus 12, it talks about the Passover and what this was. And a lot of people in the temple, they view this as a business opportunity. They're like, all these people are coming in and packing this joint, right? And people traveled far. They couldn't bring sacrifices, right? And they knew, like, the people that were running the temple knew that people were going to want to sacrifice because the book of Leviticus talked about sacrifices. It talked about how you would like sacrifice oxen and sheep and pigeons and things like that to be an atonement, to be a covering for your sin. And that they would lay that stuff down and want to sacrifice when they got there. And they were giving an offering to God, and they knew that like God's word talked about that, right? So the temple people were upcharging them. They were upcharging them. They were like charging way too much money to pay for these, right? And the people were coming in, and they were basically having to pay. They couldn't have hauled like an ox with them, brought it all that way if they were traveling like a long way. You follow me? Like, or a sheep, maybe pigeons would have been kind of hard. Something might have gone wrong, and they couldn't like really do that. So they were kind of forced to pay. Like, have you guys ever had like a medical bill that happens? And you got to pay, and you're like, holy smokes, man. I just had this small thing go on, and I'm like paying thousands of dollars. Seems like not fair. Like, why would they charge that much? It's a necessity. It gets upcharged, right? Like airlines. Like, you guys ever ridden on a plane and you got to like bring some luggage and they charge you for that, right? You guys ever been to a movie theater and you didn't sneak a can of pop in your pocket? And I always do. Like, I always sneak stuff in, man. It's a confession for real. Because they charge like $6 for a pop, man. Like, I'm not gonna pay $6. Good Lord, that's a lot of money. Come on, man. I ain't paying that for the pop, right? But they do that, right? Because they know people are gonna be locked in, right? Like, I want a snack right now. Popcorn's hard to resist. I want some, like, someday I'm just gonna bring a bag and just load it with popcorn, like a book bag, and just carry a book bag of popcorn. I mean, but they upcharge because they know people are gonna get hungry and thirsty, right? And they know there's a need, and they know they can do it, right? That's what was kind of happening here. And Jesus saw that, and he got ticked off. And this might be the biggest account of where Jesus was ticked off that we have, that we know of. And he says, don't make my Father's house a house of trade. Like, Jesus can't stand it when people use God to make a profit. He's coming in here, and he's like, how dare you take advantage of these people? How dare you do this to these people that genuinely are coming here to worship God, to meet my Father? And he's the Son of God, right? He's truly the Son of God. How dare you rip them off? How dare you do this? And he flips out, man. Could you imagine being here too? He starts flipping tables over. And he's really making a powerful statement. And he says, don't make my Father's house a house of trade. Jesus can't stand when people use God to make a profit. In some other translations, he says, don't make it a den of robbers. Like, don't rip people off. I read this and I meditate on these things and I go, it just bothers me. Like, I constantly wrestle with how to use God's money, because you guys know I'm like a pastor that gets paid, right? Like, I get paid with God's money, okay? Like, directly. You follow me? That's a big responsibility. Like, it's all God's money. It's all God's money. But, I mean, it's like pretty specific for me. Like, people are like giving towards God, and that's helping to pay my bills, provide for my family. It bothers me. Like, how do I use God's money well? Like, if you guys were tithing here, you were giving like an offering regularly, and you knew I came in here with like $300 shoes, and I spent money on that, you'd be like, that's like my money that I'm like giving to God, right? If I came in rolling in like a Jaguar, you'd be like, I'm giving that money to God, right? You'd be like, what's going on? I mean, this stuff bothers me. And I mean, it's a fact that here at the chapel in Kenmore, like, we do, like, offerings go towards salary. When people give an offering, they go towards odds and ends, like when we got to buy batteries, when we got to, like, replace something, when, we got to buy communion supplies and coffee supplies and half and cups and all that sort of stuff. We pay first glance rent, and they're, like, super generous to us. They pretty much, like, charge cost almost. All right, but we still got to pay rent. And when we started, at Akron campus, they hooked us up with all these speakers and all this nice stuff, this drum set and everything, and they gave that to us. They bought that for us. We're really grateful for that, but I mean, we just want to maintain it, right? Like, we got these TVs donated to us from the chapel in Cuyahoga Falls, for example. Like, that's why this one's got a crack in it, right? And I don't want to be bothered by stuff like that. I mean, when we had to replace a guitar amp or get a new one, we could have gotten the $2,500 one. We got a $100 one, like a little tiny one. I'm just saying all this because I think about it a lot. We think about it a lot. And when I read about Jesus and his early disciples, like, I want us to spend our money that's given to God through the chapel in Kenmore on, like, food for people that need a good meal, right? I want to spend it on meeting tangible needs of people in the community. That's what I want to see happen. We get to do a bit of that. I want to see it spent on discipling people and on helping people know Jesus and follow them with everything they are. You know, maybe maintaining what we have, maybe some staffing, but not like beefing up our Sunday thing. Not a better car or house for me or a pair of shoes for me. Not better stuff. So, I mean, like, what can you do to help? I mean, understand and believe that what I'm saying, like, I'm telling you the truth. I mean it. Like, I really want that. I really want to do things differently. I look at the church in our culture. I look at the church in the American context. And I see, like, we're spending money on crazy stuff we don't need. And we could be spending it, like, to help people. You know, we could be doing a lot of good with it. And I want to do that together. I want you to hold me accountable. Like, books are open. You want to know anything about finances, ask me. I'll tell you. You know? I know one thing for sure. Jesus can't stand it when people use God to make a profit. And that bothers me all the time, in a good way. He wants us to see God, his Father, clearly. That's why. Like, Jesus came to earth. He could have done anything. He could have been like a rich king. He could have been a millionaire dude, but he came as a humble, poor servant. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Because he wanted to prove that, like, all that stuff is not what's important. All that stuff is not what matters. People matter. People matter. God matters. The purity of who God is matters. And Jesus wants us to see who his Father really is, that his riches, the eternal riches he has for us, the eternal stuff is way greater than anything we could have here. Like, it's all fun and everything, and it's okay to have resources, and we're giving them to bless other people. And I'm telling you, I've learned this from this community that I'm in right here. Like, I've seen situations in this community where people legit, like, were the leader of an organization, and the employees couldn't get paid because they weren't getting enough money, and the lead person took the hit and stopped taking the paycheck so that their employees could be blessed. I've seen that firsthand. Like, I've seen crazy, radical stuff, like, that lives this out and what Jesus taught. So I want us to be challenged just to think. And the only thing I want us to leave with today is to start dreaming, to start thinking what we could do with our resources. What could we do with our resources to really help and bless people? How can we really, really do some good? And also, how can we give up more, be willing to sacrifice more for the sake of other people? And we'll talk about this more in our series called Cha-Ching. That's kind of a silly name. But let's pray about it together and continue to ask God what he wants us to do, how he wants us to impact our community. Pray with me now. God, I just come before you, and if we're feeling an unrest in our souls right now, let us just press into that. If there's conviction there, let us just press into that. And let us seek you. God, we want to seek your heart in what you want us to do financially. We want to seek your heart in what you want us to do with the resources you've given us. We want to reflect Jesus in this community. We want to be radically generous. We want to be helpful to people. We don't want to live crazy, over-the-top, opulent lifestyles. But at the same time, it's also okay if people are in all different places with this. And I know, some people are going to have more and some people are going to have less. But help us, just guide us, speak to our hearts and show us what you want us to do. How you want us to honor you with our finances. And God, if we've been hurt by anything that's happened in the church or by people that have done things in the name of Jesus that aren't of Jesus, I pray that you bring healing to our hearts right now too. That's really what we're asking for in this time as we enter into continued worship, we just ask that you'd bring healing and that you'd teach us to be faithful. You'd teach us to honor you with everything you've given us, God, and keep pouring it in, all that we can handle, and hold us accountable and help us to be radically faithful with whatever you give us. Radically faithful, not for our own sakes, but for the sake of others. For the sake of others that need to know who you are and that have real tangible needs that need to be met right now as we speak. There are so many in this community, God, that are going through so much stuff, that are hurting, and they need help. They need blessing. They need support. God, just lead and guide us. In Jesus' name, amen.